Nowadays, we are living in a world that is controlled by huge hegemonic powers, such as the European Union, the United States, or Japan, among others. But not only states are important. Some intergovernmental organizations do also play an important role in the economic world system, even being considered the main actors in the economic field. But where and when did they appear, and why do they have so much importance? In 1944, the negotiation between Allied powers started in Bretton Woods at the Mount Washington Hotel in the American state of New Hampshire, where 730 delegates from 44 Allied countries joined together to propose their standpoints in order to establish a basis for the liberal world economic order after the Second World War. However, delegates agreed, and while the American delegation wanted a liberal system based on the United States dollar, which was understood as the United States economic leadership mechanism, following the economics ideas of Harry Dexter White, the British delegation wanted a liberal system based on the redistributive mechanism to be more social demanding, being inspired by the economy John Maynard Keynes. United States delegation imposed its will, establishing American leadership and dominance over the post-World War II economic order, and the United States dollar as the parity, the reference currency. Previous to the Bretton Woods Accords, gold determined the capacity of currency, and depending on the gold reserve of the country, states had more or less economic power. However, in Bretton Woods, it was established that the United States could also ensure parity when the American delegation ensured that the dollar was a stable currency and could be used as a new parity, easier to manage than gold. Countries trusted in the United States because it was a strong economy that showed accountability and stability, and thus started to link all their currencies to the dollar. The German franc, the pound sterling, the French franc, the Italian lira, the Spanish peseta, and even the Japanese yen, among many others, accepted dollar as a new parity and linked all their economies to the United States, accepting it as the main economic power of the world. As every country wanted dollars, the United States started to create them. But what happened if you create thousands of dollars in the desperate way to restore the economy? Inflation. However, as every country bought dollars, the problem of inflation was solved and the American economy became stable, having the capacity to create money without having to face inflation problems. During the so-called 30 Glorious, the United States and the dollars were the most stable system, but in 1971, the former President Richard Nixon took the decision to devalue the dollar by 10% in order to determine the gain of the United States' capacity to underwrite the global monetary order. In other words, what happens if you accept one currency as a parity and link your economy to that currency and suddenly is devaluated? The dollar made the value of all currencies to fall, leading to a world economic crisis in the 1970s and 1980s. During the Bretton Woods Accords, it was also established the creation of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. The International Monetary Fund was created to promote international monetary cooperation and exchange stability, facilitating the expansion and balanced growth of international trade, and providing short-term assistance to its members to enable them to correct maladjustments in their balance of payments without resorting to measures destructive of national or international prosperity. On the other hand, the World Bank was born in response to the Keynesian call for development assistance to weaker countries to overcome war destructions and uneven development. It was composed by five main organizations: the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the International Development Association, the International Finance Corporation, the Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency, and the International Center for Settlements of Investment Disputes. In 1948, as an extension of the Bretton Woods system, it was created the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade to establish the procedures of the international trade. Even the United States wanted binding agreements on international movements towards free trade with the imposition of penalties for non-conforming countries. The GATT established the rules designed to encourage non-discrimination between countries and the progressive reductions of tariffs over time. After the Uruguay round, the GATT was incorporated to the World Trade Organization, regarded by many as a pinnacle institution to global neoliberalism, because of its commitment to ensure binding and forcible agreements on free trade and investment amongst its member states. However, the World Trade Organization has been always criticized for imposing unfair competition and development economies and favoring the neoliberal consolidation under the leadership of the European Union, the United States, and Japan. In the 1970s, with the collapse of dollar as a parity, many countries faced major deficits in which required the International Monetary Fund financing. So the IMF had the chance to impose a monetarist program by the Labour governments that were ruling in the main countries that had control over both the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. Those measures, known as structural adjustment programs, were basically stated in the Washington Consensus and were applied to the countries of the Third World. The program was based on the reduction in the government spending to reduce inflation, the liberalization of imports and the removal of restriction on foreign investment, the privatization of state enterprises to promote market-based efficient resource allocation, and the devaluation of the local currency to improve competitive exports. We must make clear that all those countries that invest a high amount of money in the World Bank could have more representation in the International Monetary Fund, which means that the rich countries will lead the world and impose its will over the others, ruling in a non-democratic institution. As a counterpoint, third world countries started to make pressure to impose their own development agenda through wider United Nations institutions to balance the policies that the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank wanted to apply. Even the IMF and the World Bank dominated the world economy because they were led by the powerful states. Developing countries of the Third World started to obtain importance in the United Nations General Assembly, which was not basing its system in $1, one vote, but in one member state, one vote. Demands of the Third World also made pressure to assure the creation of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, the Economic and Social Council, and the United Nations Development Programme. There were also some other organizations led by the developing countries that started to obtain more importance in the international community, such as the Non-Aligned Movement or the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. Therefore, the G77 became more important than the G8 and the G20. All those organizations had the responsibility to promote industrialization in the third world countries and give those countries the chance to access the developed world markets in some sectors in which they had comparative advantage, such as agriculture, textiles, or low-tech manufacturing, among others. The number of critics towards the global economic governance institutions, mainly the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, have soared in the recent years. Even there has been a reform to some extent to tackle all countries' issues. The global financial crisis in 2007 and 2008 did a lot to discredit neoliberalism and the Washington Consensus built around the global economic governance, as well as the rise of developing countries such as the BRICS members, in order to restore the balance of powers in the economic world, trying to change the system that Bretton Woods created.